The door to Unit 7C had 3 locks, and none of them worked. Marcus Hale discovered this at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, standing in a hallway that smelled like copper and something older, something he couldn't name. His duffel bag hung off one shoulder. His lease agreement was folded in his jacket pocket. The building manager, a thin woman with too many fingers who had introduced herself only as Urel, had handed him the keys without looking at him and disappeared around a corner that shouldn't have had enough space for a person to disappear around. The locks didn't work because they weren't locks. He figured that out when the door swung open at the pressure of his fingertips. And the warmth that poured out wasn't the warmth of a heated room. It was biological. Like stepping into something breathing. He went in anyway. He was 3 weeks out of reintegration camp, 2 weeks past his last paycheck, and the Galactic Housing Assistance Program had approved exactly 1 placement for a human male, non-citizen, no guild affiliation. This was it. He went in. The apartment was small, clean, and wrong in ways he couldn't immediately catalogue. The ceiling was 2 feet higher than the exterior suggested. The window looked out onto a courtyard that wasn't visible from the street. The bed frame was made of something that wasn't metal and wasn't wood and flexed slightly when he pressed it, like cartilage. He put his bag down. He did not sleep. By morning, he had catalogued 17 things that didn't add up. By noon, he'd added 3 more. The building was called the Tesserine Arms, and, according to the GHAP documentation, it housed 42 tenants across 6 floors. His floor, the 3rd, had 8 units. He had counted the doors. There were 11. The extra 3 had no numbers. He had not touched them. His nearest neighbor introduced herself the following evening by sliding a covered dish under his door. Nonak. No note. Just the scrape of ceramic on tile. And, then, silence. He opened the dish and found something that looked like stew and tasted like the best meal he'd eaten in 4 years. He sat on the floor and ate all of it and felt something in his chest loosen that he hadn't known was tight. He knocked on the door across the hall the next morning. Unit 7B. A woman opened it. Human-shaped, but he'd learned not to trust that. She had dark eyes that didn't reflect light the way eyes should, and she was wearing an apron dusted with something purple. "You're the new one," she said. "Marcus." "I know." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't classify. Not unfriendly. Not warm. Measuring. "You ate the welcome dish." Was I not supposed to? Most humans don't. They think it's a test. Is it? She smiled then, and it was the kind of smile that answered nothing. "My name is Reva. If your window shows the courtyard at dawn, come down. Not before. Not after. Dawn." She closed the door. He stood in the hall for a moment, then went back inside. He didn't know what Reva was. He didn't know what most of the tenants were. The building had that quality that displacement camps had taught him to recognize, the particular silence of people who had learned to take up less space than they needed. Everyone moved carefully. Everyone noticed everything. No one explained themselves, and no one required explanation from him. That was the first shock. He had expected friction. Suspicion. The low-grade hostility that followed humans into most shared spaces since the fracture had reshuffled everything and left humanity near the bottom of every relevant ranking. He had packed himself for it the way he'd packed his bag. Efficient, minimal, ready to move. Instead, a covered dish. A woman in an apron. An invitation to watch the dawn. He stood at his strange window at 4:47 a.m. and watched the courtyard fill with light, and what he saw down there, the shapes gathering, the slow rituals of mourning among people who were not people in any category he had documentation for, was not threatening. It was ordinary in the way that sacred things are ordinary when you live among them long enough. He went down at dawn. He did not go early. He did not go late. What happened next in that courtyard took 11 minutes and changed the entire architecture of what he thought was possible. But, before he could process it, the main door of the Tesserine Arms opened, and 3 figures walked in wearing the colors of the sovereign crown, and the building went so quiet he could hear his own pulse. Royal Guard. Here. In this building. And they were looking for someone. The guard did not announce themselves. They didn't need to. The insignia on their collars, a fractured spiral in gold on black, told every non-human in the hallway exactly what they represented. And the hallway entered the way water drains, fast, silent, total. Marcus didn't move. He wasn't sure if that was courage or the particular paralysis that comes from having nothing left to protect. He stood at the base of the stairwell and watched the three of them scan the lobby with the flat efficiency of people trained to read spaces rather than individuals. The one in the center was taller than the others. Her armor fit differently, custom jointed at the shoulders, the helm tucked under one arm rather than worn. She had the bearing of someone who had spent so long being the most dangerous person in any room that she'd stopped needing to prove it. Her eyes moved across the lobby and stopped on Marcus with zero hesitation. Human, she said. Not an insult. Just a category being confirmed. Last time I checked, he said. Something shifted in her expression. Not amusement, exactly. Interest. The other two guards had already begun moving up the stairwell, hands on their secondaries, footsteps controlled and nearly silent. She stayed. You live here, she said. Unit 7C. How long? 4 days. She looked at him the way Reva had looked at him. Measuring. But, where Reva's measurement had felt like calibration, this felt like a threat assessment that kept coming back negative and didn't know what to do with the result. Did you see anyone leave this building in the last 12 hours? She asked. I see a lot of people leave this building. I don't know most of them. Smaller than a standard frame. Moves quickly. Possibly in distress. Marcus thought about the courtyard that morning. About the shapes he'd seen. About the one figure that had been separate from the others, not participating in the ritual, just watching it. Small. Still. And, then, gone before the others finished. He thought about Reva's dish under his door. About the way she'd said most humans don't. He chose his next word carefully. No. The guard held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then, which floor is your unit? 3rd. She moved past him and up the stairs without another word. He waited until her footsteps faded, then walked to Reva's door and knocked twice, fast. It opened before his knuckles finished the second strike. Reva wasn't alone. Behind her, pressed against the wall between the window and the bed, was a child. Not a human child. The proportions were wrong, the skin too pale, the eyes too large and too still. But the posture was unmistakably a child's posture. Terrified, small, trying to take up no space at all. You didn't tell them, Reva said. It wasn't a question. Who is she? Reva's jaw tightened. Someone who shouldn't be here and can't go back. The guard said possibly in distress. The guard, Reva said, is who she's in distress about. Marcus looked at the child. The child looked back at him with eyes that held something he recognized, not because he'd seen it in alien faces, but because he'd seen it in mirrors, in the years when the fracture was new and humans were being processed and sorted and assigned categories that determined everything that came after. That particular look. The one that says I know exactly what I am to these people and I'm hoping you are something different. He turned back to Reva. How long can you keep her here? They'll search the floor. All the units. They have Crown authority. Yes. He looked at the room. At the child. At the window overlooking the courtyard where the morning ritual had been, and was now empty, the participants scattered. My unit, he said. They already cleared my identity. They won't expect to come back. Reva stared at him. You've been here 4 days. I know. You don't know what she is. You don't know what they'll do to you if they find her there. I have a general idea, he said, and I'm asking anyway. Reva didn't argue further. That was the second shock, not what she said, but what she didn't say. She moved to the child, crouched to eye level, and spoke in a language Marcus didn't have, low and careful. The child looked at Marcus. Then, she nodded once and stood. They moved her in under 3 minutes. He hid her in the space behind the cartilage bed frame, against the wall that was too far from the window for any surface scan to resolve cleanly. He gave her his extra jacket. He sat on the bed above her and opened the only book he'd brought, a battered field guide to outer rim transit routes, and waited. The guard came back 16 minutes later. She knocked. He opened the door. She looked at the room with the same flat efficiency, her eyes moving in the same practice grid. His pulse was a fist in his throat. He kept his face the way the camps had taught him to keep it, present but absent, compliant but empty. Checking all third-floor units, she said. Go ahead, he said, and stepped aside. She scanned the room. Twice. Her equipment hummed once, near the window, and Marcus stopped breathing. The hum faded. The equipment moved on. She turned back toward the door. You've been in reintegration, she said. It wasn't a question. She'd seen something, his posture, his file, something. For years, he said. A pause. What camp? Velera Station. Another pause, longer. Something moved behind her eyes, not softness, but recognition. The kind that passes between people who have been near the same kind of damage, even if they approached it from opposite sides. She put her helm back on. Lock your door, she said. It's not a safe night to leave it open. She left. He locked the door. From behind the bed, the smallest possible sound, a child exhaling. He sat back down and did not move for 2 hours. By midnight, the guard had left the building. Marcus knew because Reva knocked, one slow knock, one fast, one slow, and, when he opened the door, she was standing with 2 other tenants he hadn't met yet. One was tall, grey-skinned, with hands that were structured for something other than holding objects. The other was shorter, robed, face half obscured. Both looked at Marcus with the same measuring quality that everyone in this building seemed to carry like a second set of eyes. You need to understand what you've done, the tall one said. His voice was layered, 2 frequencies, one in hearing range, one just below it. I hid a frightened child from armed forces, Marcus said. I understand that fine. She's not just a child. Marcus looked at the girl, who was standing now, jacket around her shoulders, watching him with those 2 still eyes. I didn't ask what she was. I asked if she was scared. The robed figure made a sound that might have been a laugh suppressed into something smaller. She's the 4th born of the sovereign line, Reva said quietly. The Queen's youngest. She ran 3 days ago. No one outside the Crown family knows she's missing except the guard unit sent to retrieve her, and they have orders to do it quietly. Marcus processed this. Why did she run? Reva looked at the girl. The girl looked at Marcus and spoke for the first time. Her voice was older than her body, not in tone, but in weight. Because they were going to make me into something I am not, she said. And I would rather be nothing than that. The room held the sentence like a held breath. Marcus understood it. Not because he'd been royalty. He'd been the opposite of royalty, processed and numbered and reintegrated into a galaxy that had decided what he was before he could say otherwise. But because the shape of the thing she was describing, the particular violence of being defined against your will, he knew that shape from the inside. What do you need? He asked. The girl straightened slightly. Time. And someone the guard has already dismissed. Marcus nodded. Okay. You understand what that means, the tall tenant said. When they realize she's here, they'll come back, Marcus said. And I'll need to be more convincing the second time. He looked at the room. At the people in it. All of you. All of us have reasons to be in a building that doesn't appear on standard registry maps, Reva said simply. All of us know what it costs to be seen by the wrong people. Yes. He looked at each face. 4 days ago, he had walked into a building with broken locks and a wrong-shaped ceiling and had eaten a stranger's dish off the floor because he had nowhere else to be. Then, we help each other, he said. The third shock was the one he hadn't anticipated. No one in the room looked surprised. As if they had been waiting for a human to say that. As if some of them had been waiting for years. They had 6 hours before the guard rotation changed and a new unit came on. One without the recognition he'd seen in the tall soldier's eyes. One without whatever hesitation had made her warn him instead of search more carefully. Reva knew someone 3 buildings over who had transit contacts. The grey-skinned tenant, he introduced himself as Sove, had access to the building's maintenance tunnels, which ran beneath the street grid and connected to a station that wasn't on any map Marcus had ever carried. The robed figure said nothing but produced, from somewhere in the folds of the robe, a travel seal so well forged that even Marcus, who had no training in such things, could feel how convincing it was just by the weight of it. The girl, she told him her name was Essa, not the formal designation she'd been given at birth but the name her mother had used when no one else was listening, stayed close to Marcus throughout the planning. Not because he was the most capable person in the room. He clearly wasn't. But Because he was the one who had made the choice that mattered most, and she seemed to understand instinctively that such choices deserve proximity. "Why didn't you ask questions first?" she said to him, near 3 a.m., while the others worked in low voices across the room. "About what?" "About who I was. What the risk was. You just moved." Marcus thought about it. In the camps, he said, there were two kinds of people. The ones who needed to understand the situation completely before they acted, and the ones who looked at a frightened face and acted first. The first kind were usually smarter than me. They also spent a lot of time calculating while things got worse. Essa was quiet for a moment. "My mother makes decisions like you." "The Queen?" "Yes." "That's either a compliment or a warning." "It's both," she said. She also trusted the wrong people because she moved too fast to check them properly. Marcus looked at the girl. "Is that what happened to you?" She didn't trust the wrong people. She trusted the right ones too much, and, when they changed, she didn't see it in time. Essa pulled the jacket tighter. "I saw it. She wouldn't believe me. So I ran to find proof." "Do you have it?" "Not yet." "But, you know where it is." "Yes." He looked at Reva, who had stopped pretending not to listen. Reva looked back at him with an expression that said, "Yes, this is larger than we thought, and, yes, you are already in it past the point of return." At 4:15 a.m., Sove opened the maintenance tunnel access behind the kitchen panel that Marcus hadn't known was a panel. At 4:22, they moved. Single file. No lights except Sove's bioluminescent markings, which he dialed to minimum, just enough to see the next step. The tunnels ran deep and strange. Marcus had stopped cataloging strangeness by then. He walked and he listened and he kept Essa close and he thought about nothing except the next 3 feet of ground. They were 200 meters from the exit station when they heard the boots. Not behind them. Above. The guard had found the tunnel access. They were moving parallel, faster, because they knew the grid and Marcus's group didn't. Sove stopped. Held up one hand. The boots paused. Silence. Complete and total, the kind that has weight. Then, Essa did something Marcus didn't expect. She stepped forward, past Sove, past Reva, and placed both hands flat against the tunnel wall. She stood very still. She said nothing. But the tunnel changed. Marcus felt it before he understood it. A pressure difference. A shift in the acoustic properties of the space, like a room rearranging itself around new furniture. The boots above them moved, and then moved wrong. They were going left. The exit was right. The guard was heading away. Essa lowered her hands. She was breathing hard. "You can do that," Marcus said. It was not a question. "I couldn't, 3 months ago," she said. "I learned it from someone I wasn't supposed to spend time with. That's part of why they were going to." She stopped. "It doesn't matter." "It matters," he said. "But not right now." "No," she agreed. "Not right now." They moved. The exit station was a maintenance hub that smelled like ozone and old hydraulics, and it was not empty. The tall guard was waiting. She was alone. Helm off. Weapon holstered. She stood in the center of the space with her hands visible, which Marcus understood was deliberate, a signal, not a surrender. Essa stopped walking. The rest of the group stopped. Marcus stepped forward because his feet made the decision before his mind did. "You followed us," he said. "I found the tunnel access before my unit did and redirected them," she said. "I've been following you to make sure you had enough time." "Why?" The guard looked at Essa. Something in her posture shifted, not softening exactly, but the removal of a specific kind of tension that had been structural until that moment. "Because I was at Velera Station," she said. "Not as a prisoner. I was assigned security rotation there 6 years ago, when I was still a junior officer." She paused. "I saw what it cost people to be processed through that place. I didn't stop it. I told myself it wasn't my jurisdiction." Another pause. "I've been telling myself that about a lot of things for a long time." Marcus held very still. "She needs to get to the outer circuit," the guard said, addressing Reva now. "There's a transit hub on Kessel Point that isn't Crown monitored. My seal will get you through the first 3 checkpoints. After that," she looked at Marcus, After that, you're on your own. But the guard rotation doesn't cover Kessel Point jurisdiction. You'll have 6 days before anyone thinks to look there. And then? Marcus asked. And then, she either has the proof she went looking for, or she doesn't. The guard's eyes went to Essa. Do you? I know where it is, Essa said. Then, go get it. The guard pulled a chip from her collar, the transit seal, physically encoded, non-replicable, and held it out. And, when you bring it back, bring it to the Sovereign Court directly. Not to the guard. Not to the advisors. Directly to the Queen. Essa crossed the space and took the chip. She held it in both hands and looked up at the guard with those two still eyes. You're going to be in serious trouble, Essa said. Yes, the guard said simply. Will you be all right? I've been in trouble before. She looked at Marcus. You both have. He almost smiled. He didn't, because the moment wasn't finished yet, and he'd learned a long time ago not to relax before the last door was through. He waited. The guard stepped aside. There's a transit pod behind the third panel on your left. It's fueled. The route is preloaded. Don't deviate from it. They moved. All of them, single file, not running but close to it. Marcus went last, and, as he passed the guard, she said one more thing, quiet, directed at him, not meant for the others. You were dismissed the first time because you had nothing. That's why I looked away. Remember that. The next authority that looks at you will do the same thing. A beat. Use it. He looked at her for 1 second. Then, he kept walking. The pod was where she said it was. They were inside and sealed before the ozone smell had fully faded from his lungs. Sove ran the preloaded route. Reva strapped in without speaking. The robed figure sat so still Marcus couldn't be certain they were breathing. Essa sat beside him. She was holding the chip in both hands in her lap, and she was looking at nothing in particular, and Marcus understood she was doing what people do when they've been running for so long that the first moment of stillness feels more dangerous than the motion did. Essa, he said. She looked at him. Whatever you find at Kessel Point, it's going to be hard to bring it back. Even with the guard seal. Even with 6 days. They'll figure it out before then. I know. So what do we do about that? She looked at the chip. At the route on Sove's screen. At her own hands. Then, she looked at Marcus with the expression of someone who has been trying to carry a thing alone for so long that being asked to share the weight feels like a different kind of danger, the kind you have to choose. We do what your kind does, she said. We move before the calculation is finished. She held his gaze. And we trust that the people we've found are worth trusting. The pod accelerated into the tunnel dark, toward a point on the map that didn't officially exist, carrying a Queen's daughter and a human from a reintegration camp and, for neighbors he hadn't known 4 days ago, and, behind them the Tesserine Arms held its wrong-shaped ceiling and, its 11 doors and, its courtyard dawn, and, somewhere in it a guard stood alone in a maintenance hub and, waited to face whatever came next. The last thing Marcus felt before the first checkpoint light hit the pod's viewport was not fear. It was not hope either, exactly. It was the specific, clarifying feeling of being exactly where you are supposed to be, in the middle of something that is not finished, with people you would choose again. The checkpoint scanner swept the pod. Read the seal. Cleared them through. They kept moving.